Hey folks, this is Riker, and the new villain in Elden Ring's upcoming expansion, Shadow of the Erdtree, may not be who you think. Between the trailer that dropped, the website giving additional details, and the game director conducting interviews, theories have been running rampant. So in this video, we'll consolidate everything we know about Shadow of the Erdtree and its features, and put forth some theories about its story. But after that, stick around for some other gaming news highlights of the week. It's been a rough time for indie game launches and multiplayer issues, and we also got some word on a feature that is set to return to Diablo 4. But before we dive into everything, a quick word from this video's sponsor, Last Epoch. I've been talking about this game for years, since its Kickstarter in 2018, and this is my first sponsorship with them. After years of early access, Last Epoch finally launched this week. I've consistently said over the years that this game has a lot of promise, and it has delivered on those promises. I always said that it would be a solid entry into the RPG genre, that the devs have really great ideas on how to approach different systems and design problems, and that Last Epoch has my favorite active skill system of any RPG ever. Every single skill has its own skill tree with game-changing nodes. This combines that meaningful feeling of progression with the ability to customize a skill in ways that can allow you to have builds that play completely differently, yet use the same skill. I honestly believe that this is the new template for how all ARPGs should do skill systems moving forward. The Last Epoch also has really robust itemization and crafting. I've been quoted as saying that their trade system is genius, an innovative way of making both trade and non-trade players happy. It has meaningful endgame and a story based on time travel where you get to experience recurring locations and characters in different eras. So go check out Last Epoch on Steam. It's only $35 for one of the best ARPGs currently on the market. Okay, now let's kick things off with some Elden Ring news. This week we got finally the trailer and release date for the game's first expansion, Shadow of the Erdtree. It's going to release June 21st and cost $40, and it's looking fantastic. FromSoft's character and creature design never ceases to amaze me. Just so incredibly creative and memorable. The new environments also look great. We see more of them on the Elden Ring website. So much variety. And between what we see in this trailer and other information we've gleaned, this is shaping up to possibly be the biggest DLC that From Software has ever done for any of its games. And that says a lot because From Software DLC has been consistently solid, adding enough new content to more than justify its price tag, new mechanics, new levels, new bosses, generally story or lore content as well. You can argue that their DLC is generally even better than the base game because they've had time to further refine what's already great, and you get some of the best encounters and content in these. Shadow of the Erdtree is taking us to the Land of Shadow, a place obscured by the Erdtree, where the goddess Marika first set foot. So this will be a completely different map from the base game, which is the Lands Between. We'll be magically transported to the Land of Shadow, somehow from Miquella's arm in Mohg's palace. Game director Hidetaka Miyazaki has said that Shadow of the Erdtree will focus on denser and richer level design compared to the base game, and that in terms of pure surface area, the zone we'll have to play in this expansion will be larger than even Limgrave in the base game. This here is Limgrave for reference, but the fact that he's talking about denser level design suggests a lot of verticality in the new zones, so we can expect things to feel, in practice, even larger than this. This expansion also adds new weapons, equipment, weapon skills, and magic not found in the base game. And of course, new enemies. There's over 10 new boss encounters, new storylines, and we can see that the expansion will weigh in at 12 gigs because the system requirements on Steam for Elden Ring have gone from 48 to 60 gigs. Miyazaki has also said that the new weapons will be a main selling point for the expansion. There's going to be 8 new weapon types, as well as additions to existing weapon types. Miyazaki mentioned Odachi, which is a super long katana, Gyakutaken, which seems to translate to some kind of reverse grip blades. We also see martial arts and throwing daggers in the trailer, as well as a giant shield with spikes on either end, being used as an offensive weapon. This is actually a real thing in history that's been known as a dueling shield. So that's all the information that we have, but now let's get into some speculation. What can we deduce and theorize from what we're seeing in the trailer and elsewhere? Well, first off, rumors and theories already began to emerge of a second DLC, and Miyazaki shot those down. Speaking to IGN, he said, quote, "We don't have any current plans to make a second DLC or a sequel, but we definitely don't want to snuff out that possibility. We think that there could well be something in the future." So, maybe in the future, but don't look for any hints right now. Another thing we know for sure that can help with speculation is that George R.R. Martin, who wrote the lore for Elden Ring, did not produce any new material for this expansion. This was confirmed by Miyazaki. He specifically said in an interview with IGN, quote, "In making the base game and making Elden Ring, we took from that mythos, but we only took one part of it. We took from a part that created the story of Elden Ring and created the world that we wanted to envision. And the Shadow of the Erdtree is yet another part of that original mythos that he wrote and that has inspired us to create the story of this DLC. That means Shadow of the Erdtree is drawing upon pre-existing lore, no retcons, and we could possibly already have hints at that DLC in-game since day one of release years ago. It's not a guarantee, but it's possible. Alright, now, again, based on everything that we know, it sounds like Miquella will be an important, possibly the most important part of this expansion. We know that we're going to be guided by Miquella to the Land of Shadow. So, let's do a quick recap on Miquella, and I guess some other Elden Ring lore to establish Miquella. So, first off, the Elden Ring. It's not a thing. This is not a thing. It's a concept. It's a set of rules that govern the laws of the world. The Erdtree, that giant golden glowing tree you see in the game, that's a manifestation of the Elden Ring. It's a sort of world tree that grants blessings to the inhabitants of the game world, and that world is known as the Lands Between. Now, some beings are able to become vessels of the Elden Ring, and if they do, they are elevated to godhood. Queen Marika is the latest example of this. She became a vessel of the Elden Ring and thus became a goddess. Though this isn't the only way to become a god. It's just one of the ways. And any being that has the capacity to become a god is called an Empyrean, and there aren't too many Empyreans around. So, Queen Marika had many children with different consorts. Most of her offspring were not Empyreans, though they were still demigods. Now, one of her consorts was named Radagon, who seemed like he was just a man, but as it turns out, Radagon was also Marika. It's a little confusing. Radagon and Marika eventually get fused into one being, but this seems to be a fusion that transcends time, such that Radagon was actually always Marika's other half. In any case, Marika and Radagon gave birth to twins, demigods Malenia and Miquella, who were Empyreans. But because their mom was also their dad, they each were born with an affliction. Malenia had the Scarlet Rot, and Miquella was cursed to remain a child forever. The Scarlet Rot is a flesh-eating disease. It ate away at Malenia. She lost some of her limbs to it, had to use prosthetics. Nonetheless, she became a great warrior and sworn protector of her brother, while Miquella tried his whole life to find a cure for his sister's disease. He did succeed in stopping it from progressing, but not curing it entirely. So, Miquella came up with a plan. He would make his own Erdtree, entomb himself within it, and as the tree would grow, he would grow in power with it, becoming strong enough to lift the curses on himself and his sister. It makes logical sense, right? This tree would become known as the Halig Tree, and you find it in-game. But Miquella's plan failed because after he put himself inside the tree and began his hibernation, another child of Marika, Miquella's half-brother Mohg, Lord of Blood, cut the tree open and whisked away the still sleeping Miquella to Mohgwyn Palace. Without Miquella, the Halig Tree withered. Mohg's plan was to become Miquella's consort and raise Miquella to god status so that he can then rule at Miquella's side. Mohg was not an Empyrean, so he couldn't become a god himself, and he figured this was the closest he can get. So Mohg put himself and Miquella inside a cocoon and had his followers make blood sacrifices on it, hoping that'll work. But no matter how much blood was offered, Miquella did not awake. When we, the player, arrive on the scene, we see Mohg emerge from the cocoon, still holding Miquella's hand. We defeat Mohg and leave Miquella sleeping in the cocoon. Or so we thought. As it turns out, the reason Miquella has been unresponsive is because he stripped himself of his flesh and traveled to the Land of Shadow. So the body there was just an empty husk. This image here is Miquella, and Miquella is said to be in the Land of Shadow to await the return of his promised lord. Who might this be? Might it be you, the player? We also see what must be Miquella at the end of the trailer. The golden hair is a dead giveaway, but the figure is also surrounded by flames. We'll come back to that. Now, with all that established about Miquella, let's talk about a prominent figure we see in the trailer. Mezmer the Impaler, a tall, lanky, red-haired spear wielder who feels like he will be the millennia of this expansion. You get a statue of this guy with the collector's edition of the game. He's plastered on the cover, sitting on a throne, and the website tells us that the Land of Shadow is set ablaze by Mezmer's flame. So clearly, there is zero chance that Mezmer is the final boss of Shadow of the Erdtree. It's not going to happen. It's just too obvious, and From Software does not do obvious. They rarely show the final boss in their trailers, and when they do, it's just a quick glimpse. The final boss always ends up being someone unexpected. Now, a lot of theories are going around as to who Mezmer is exactly. First off, his red hair. This seems to be a common trait of the children of Radagon. And in a trailer, a voice that may be Mezmer refers to a mother that can sanction lordship. This mother seems to be Marika. So one theory is that Mezmer is a third child of Radagon and Marika, a sibling to Miquella and Malenia. His name also starts with an M, and we tend to see siblings that all share names that start with the same letter in Elden Ring. Either they're all M's, they're all R's, they're all G's, because GRM, George R.R. Martin. And this seems like it's supported as well by the butterfly theories. You see, there are 3 butterfly crafting items in the game. The Aeonian butterfly, the nascent butterfly, and the smoldering butterfly. The Aeonian butterfly's flavor text says that these butterflies were once the wings of the goddess of rot herself. So this butterfly refers to Malenia, the goddess of rot. The nascent butterfly's flavor text includes, this butterfly appears as if it's just emerged from its cocoon for its entire life. Who's in a cocoon and has been a child his entire life? Miquella. And the smoldering butterfly flavor text says, an eternally burning butterfly found near wildfires and elsewhere. Serves as the kindling for a number of items. Well, Mezmer the Impaler clearly uses fire magic, and the Land of Shadow is said to have been set ablaze by Mezmer's flame. So, 3 butterflies, each representing one of 3 siblings. But it doesn't end there. You may have caught mention of the word kindling. There's a character in Elden Ring known as the Kindling Maiden, Melina, the mysterious character who helps the player. Not a whole lot is known about Melina, but it's implied that her mother is Marika. She's currently a lost spirit because her body was burned at some point. She just knows that she wants to get to the Erdtree to remember her purpose, the purpose that her mother gave her, since she was born at the foot of the Erdtree. And throughout the story, Melina does reach the tree, whereupon she sacrifices herself to set it on fire. So, fire, Melina, Mezmer. Melina is also noteworthy for having her left eye always closed. And guess what? If you pay close attention, Mezmer also keeps his left eye closed. Could Mezmer and Melina be 2 aspects of the same person, the way that Radagon and Marika are 2 aspects of the same person? Melina also seems to have strawberry blonde hair, a mixture perhaps of Radagon's red hair and Marika's blonde hair. And again, her name starts with an M, so she fits in there as well as one of the siblings. That's one theory. Another theory is that Mezmer and Miquella are 2 aspects of the same person. Remember, at the end of the trailer, Miquella appears to be wreathed in flames. People have also pointed out that Mezmer has a dragon eye, and he's wearing dragon armor, so it's speculated that the 2nd or even 3rd phase of his fight will see him transform into a dragon. And in any case, both these theories, whether Mezmer is Melina or Miquella or some aspect of them, or some projection or shadow of them, that does leave the door open for either Melina or Miquella to be the true villains of the expansion. But anyway, those are the theories that I'm kicking around. What about you folks? What are your Shadow of the Erdtree theories? Sound off in the comments. In other news, Helldivers 2 has been an incredible surprise hit and is suffering from success. the third-person sequel to the 2015 top-down shooter, sold over 1 million copies in about 3 days, got positive critic reviews, and is so popular that it has been plagued with absolutely terrible server issues, rendering the game unplayable for a ton of players for a prolonged period of time. Just how many people were trying to play Helldivers 2 simultaneously? We actually don't know, because the only way the devs could get the game playable for at least some players was to set a limit to the servers of 450,000 concurrent players across both PC and PS5. In other words, probably over 500,000 people were trying to get on and play. Steam alone saw a concurrent player peak of just over 450,000, and it was estimated that PC consisted of about 70% of the player base, so that could mean about 650,000 concurrent attempted players at one point. And players were reporting that it could take them 2 hours of queuing before they got into a game. And then matchmaking was effectively non-functional once you even got in. The situation was exacerbated by people who would refuse to log out once they got in. There was no AFK timer to kick you out, so to ensure they didn't have to wait in queue again, they would just leave the game running while they went to sleep. And while on OpenCritic, the game had a top critic average score of 82, very respectable, with 90% of critics recommending the game, on Steam, frustrated users leaving bad reviews dropped the reviews down to mixed. That said, since then it has recovered, and the reviews have been steadily getting better. As the devs have been working at improving the situation, we now see mostly positive reviews, and I expect that'll keep going up as server issues continue to be resolved. As of this recording, they've raised the concurrent user cap to 700,000, but they expect that that cap will be hit nonetheless, and it's unclear if by this weekend they'll be able to support everyone. The devs did, however, release a patch that will now kick idle players after 15 minutes of inactivity, so that should at least help the situation considerably. And if there's one recurring theme in our video this week, it's going to be that releasing a multiplayer game is hard. And if you're an indie studio seeing unexpected success, it can be especially difficult to get the situation under control, because this isn't just something you can throw money at to make the problem go away. You need manpower. It's like if you're hosting a dinner party and your dining room table can seat 5 guests, but then 15 people show up at your door. Yeah, you can go out and buy a bigger dining room table, but what is that going to solve? You're not logistically prepared to accommodate that many people. You can't cook for 15 people simultaneously. You can't serve everyone their meal at the same time. There's all these other things you now need to change about your plan, your logistics, your infrastructure in your kitchen and your home and your entire dinner plan. It's not just buy a bigger table. Similarly, buy more servers or spend money on bigger servers isn't enough to solve these problems. Believe me, no one wants you playing the game that they made more than the devs of the game. They're not being greedy or stingy. They know it looks bad. They know you're review bombing them. This is the most exciting time of their life where the game is getting a huge amount of attention. They would do anything to get things playable as soon as possible. And in the case of these devs at Arrowhead Studios, Helldivers 1 had a peak concurrent player base of under 7,000 players. For Helldivers 2, they believe they over-prepared. They prepared for a maximum concurrent player count of 50,000, almost 10 times what their previous peak was, just to be safe. And they're seeing over 10 times that. And what doesn't help is that their game was built on a game engine that is so old that it was discontinued during the development of the game. This engine, called BitSquid, it was later rebranded to Stingray. This was used to build Helldivers 1, and they'd already started work on Helldivers 2 when the game engine was discontinued. So the engineers at Arrowhead had to figure out everything themselves with no support, no official updates to bring the engine up to par with other modern game engines. And despite all that, the game itself, once you're playing the game, plays great. And in what could be considered related news, Last Epoch, as we said, officially launched this week, and it has also been suffering from success. Servers were overloaded, and there was some downtime, and otherwise there have been some trouble playing online for a couple of days now since it launched. The good thing about Last Epoch, however, is that there is an offline mode, unlike many modern ARPGs. So myself, after I saw the login issues, right, I spent like maybe 20 minutes waiting, hoping things would settle on launch day, and after that I just made an offline character, and I've put in like 18 hours of play since then. have no issues at all, having a great time just playing offline. I wanted to make a solo self-found character anyway, so playing offline doesn't really impact me in any way. In fact, it does. By playing offline, I could actually pause the game. Now, throughout the issues and the downtime, the devs have been extremely communicative. They're constantly issuing updates on the situation. The CEO, Judd himself, he's bringing a lot of the updates. In a public message, Judd wrote, quote, "Even though we felt we were prepared and came in with a high level of confidence, even feeling that we were over-prepared, we were shown that in a real-world situation, things can go wrong that just simply do not in simulated scale testing." Within 20 minutes of launch, 150,000 people had joined us. This did mean that all of our scale testing efforts were immediately put to the test. And unfortunately, a service failed in a way that we didn't suspect, and we immediately went to work to investigate and resolve it. As a thank you for everyone's patience, the devs even gave away a free cosmetic to everyone. As of this recording, the game peaked at just shy of 200,000 concurrent players, and I expect that to be surpassed this weekend. Unfortunately, because of the multiplayer issues, the game is getting a lot of negative reviews, which is really unfortunate, given that even AAA companies struggle with servers on launch day, let alone an indie company releasing its first game, and the game is fully playable with no issues in offline mode. Now, it is fair to be unhappy with the state of servers. It's fair to be critical of the game because of that. And for some people, if they can't play with others, if they can't play multiplayer, then there's no point playing at all. I know that some people are like that. So I could understand leaving a negative review if you wanted a multiplayer game and you can't play multiplayer. But I would encourage people who have been playing the game to remember to review the game as well. Don't just let the people unhappy with servers be the main voices in all the Steam reviews. I mean, hey, even David Harbour is a fan of the game. He's legit a big fan of ARPGs, and he actually worked with the dev team to design an item for last Epoch. This one right here, a Necromancer helm called the Wraith Lord's Harbor. Get it? Harbor? With this item, when you cast Summon Wraith, you instead summon a Wraith Lord, who then summons Wraiths for you. And for anyone who may not be up to speed, the game launched with full controller support, and while there is no WASD support currently, Judd acknowledged that more gamers are interested in this recently and that they're looking into it. In some quick Diablo 4 news, we learned this week that the next campfire chat will take place on February 29th at 11 a.m. PST. We'll get an update on the Gauntlet, leaderboards, balance updates, and bloodthirsty powers set to make their return. Sounds like they're bringing back the vampiric powers from Season 2 in some way as a permanent addition to the game. Good news. I hope it also comes with the Blood Harvest permanently added to the game. I mean, can you imagine the state of the game when, in the outer world, there could be multiple different events going on in different places or at different times, be it Blood Harvest, be it the Season 3 event, Helltide, all these different things, and we have more choices in what we want to engage with. Also, during the campfire chat, there will be a special event where members of the dev team will actually be playing the Gauntlet themselves. A lot of people have been, saying, oh, do the devs even play their own game? Well, you'll get to see them play their own game, and content creators Macro BioBoy and Anacake will be commentating live the gameplay, so that ought to be fun to watch. In other news, we got the official announcement trailer of Kingmakers this week, which seemed like a neat medieval battle sim strategy game, until the pickup truck appeared, at which point I started grinning ear to ear. Lobbing grenades into a group of knights, living out the "this is my boomstick" fantasy like we've never seen before. I mean, there's even a friggin' Apache helicopter at the end. This game looks like too much fun. It's an action strategy sandbox where you bring guns to a sword fight, and it's coming to Steam in 2024, complete with solo or co-op play. Sometimes I think that we forget that games are meant to be fun. This just looks fun. Then, in a quick Palworld update, the devs have admitted that they just can't keep up with cheaters. But they are working on an anti-cheat solution. And thankfully, they seem to be doing it in a way that it'll not interfere or harm the modding scene. As they said that either you can turn off the anti-cheat for single-player mode, or otherwise that it won't be turned on in offline mode. And while this isn't 100%, it's likely that this anti-cheat will only apply to their official servers, and, not if you're just hosting a game locally for you and your buddies and want to run mods and whatever. Even big game studios have trouble dealing with cheaters, so when a small studio suddenly gets 15 million sales, yeah, they can't exactly be faulted for not being able to handle cheaters. Again, that's the recurring theme this week, small devs suffering from success and doing their best to act swiftly to put out fires that they never realized they would have to deal with. And lastly, in some Final Fantasy VII Rebirth news, the game's official launch is coming up on February 29th, but review embargoes have been lifted and the reviews are excellent. On OpenCritic, the game has a top average score of 93 out of 100, with 100% of critics recommending it, and that's based on 99 critic reviews. Really incredible. The only concern that reviewers seem to be pointing to is that the story changes will be divisive with this one, but honestly, that can be a positive if you were hoping for some big twists. And that's the question I'll leave for you folks. Were you hoping that this one would stay more true to the original story or go even further off the rails? Sound off in the comments, because that's going to wrap up this week's video. But do be sure to have checked out last week's video in which we discussed Diablo 4's huge Uber drop rate buff. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. And subscribe to join Rikers Raiders for more gaming content.